excited to bring a very, very special guest with you today. Flying her all the way in from Redding, California, Northern California. And Cassandra, I met her through being a part of Iris Ministries and Heidi Baker, and she is just a laid down lover and has written 2 books and really good book on Heidi Baker, Love Like Fire. And so she's just going to join us. Feel free to post questions. We will try to get to those as well. And I'm going to just introduce you to the lovely Cassandra Soars. If you want to say, tell us a little bit about yourself, and you also edit as well, but just share a little bit about your story, and it'd be great to thank you for being on the show. The first time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk to you and to talk to all of you. What's your background? Are you in Hawaii right now?
You know what? During these times, you have to stay close to Hawaii and the beach. So I live in Hawaii in my room in Orange County.
I love it. It's great.
I have to be in Hawaii, you know?
Yeah, it looks like you're in Hawaii. Like the beach is right there.
Yeah. I mean, that's the way you get through this season, right? Stay at the beach.
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, I am a writer and a speaker, and I have been writing since I was very young. Actually, I was thinking about that today. When did I first start writing? I think I was in like the 2nd grade, and I won a little, short story award or something, and I got a special tea luncheon. And I think what originally drew me to writing was the way that you can just use your imagination and create a world with your own imagination and words. So I still really love it. I have a master's degree in writing. I taught writing at the college level at Geneva College on the East Coast. And while I was teaching college, my career goal was to be a professor, tenured professor. And Jen, to get tenure, you have to publish and go through a series of hoops over a number of years. And one of those hoops that you have to jump through is publication and publishing. And it doesn't matter what you publish, but you have to publish. So that was my goal after my MFA when I started teaching. And out of nowhere, I had this intense desire to know everything I could about the continent of Africa and the people and the politics and the social injustice that was happening there. And so I started reading and studying everything I could. And then I knew I was supposed to go and find my story. And I was 24, I was single. I went to Africa by myself, not knowing anyone, to find my story. Basically, I took a semester off from teaching. I told the university I would be back the following semester, and I was going to do research. And that's how I met Heidi Baker. I volunteered with her ministry while I was doing my research. I had no idea what I was going to write about. And it was not long after I got to Pemba, which was a small town in northern Mozambique, that I was just fascinated by Heidi's story and the work that she was doing. And of course, it was the first time I was encountering extreme poverty, people living in mud huts. And these people weren't just like a statistic, but they were actually my friends now. And I was sitting with them, getting to know them, getting to know their family, and actually seeing that they did not have money for food. Like, I was with my friend Fatima one day with her little 2-year-old son, Johnny, and she literally, I didn't want to impose, like I didn't want to overstay, because I didn't want to be there while they were eating and have her feel obligated to feed me when I knew she had so little. So I said, "What time do you eat today?" And she said, "Oh, actually, we're not eating today. My brother was supposed to bring us money and he didn't come." And I was just shocked. So that was the beginning of my journey. And it's a long story, but that was the start of my book, Love Like Fire. And actually, I gave up my career as a college professor to move to Mozambique full time. And I lived there for almost 7 years, partly doing research, but then getting involved with Heidi's ministry and work. So great to be here. And I met you, Jen, in England. I think I was traveling with Heidi, or I was there studying, actually. I did some more research and study, and you were there at that time, and that's how we met.
And I was doing my Ph.D. on Carrie Judd Montgomery during that time. That was like probably a decade ago.
I think it was 2007, because that's when I was living in London.
Oh, wow. 13 years ago. That is amazing. I think I don't know if I remember seeing you in England, but that was a long time ago.
It was. I loved how Heidi, over Christmas, when we saw her, she called us her smart girls. That was so cute.
She has a lot of those, actually. It's pretty interesting, the smart people.
Because she's smart. I think she likes the interaction.
Yeah. Wow. Well, it's just so fun to have you here. I was just my last trip to Reading. We got to hang out for a little bit. I did a writing in the Glory workshop the day before everything shut down, 90 people, and then the church shut down
Amazing.
the next day. It was pretty insane. And I'm so thankful that you opened up your home. Guys, if you ever want to go to Reading and have an epic, amazing Airbnb, connect with Cassandra. She not only edits and is an amazing editor and will help take your work to the next level, and a writer, but yeah, it's a great just place full of peace. And I had the privilege to be up there during the craziness. So such a treasure. It's so fun to introduce this just awesome community of writers from around the world. I've seen some of you guys posting where you're coming from right now, and to bring Cassandra and what she carries. She's actually been a guest speaker for some of my live workshops in Reading, and yeah. So I think what would be really cool, and feel free, you guys who are watching online, to post any questions. It's neat to see the Virginia crew and Orange County crew represent and tell us where you're coming from. But I think maybe something that would be helpful for people watching. I know we have a lot of authors that are close to finishing their books, or they just finished their books. But I think towards the end of the process, maybe some of your personal process of writing and practical things that have helped you just kind of be motivated and continue the journey would be helpful, I think, for people watching.
Yeah. One of the biggest victories that I've had personally was the publication of Love Like Fire, because it was something that was so close to my heart. And, the story itself was so impacting to me. I knew it would impact so many other people. And it was such a long process. When I came out of grad school, I thought, within 2 years, I'll have my first book published. That was just my assumption. So I went to Mozambique, I did my research, and I thought 4 months will be enough time to be in Mozambique, do my research, and then publish. And it was 10 years from the time I started the book to the time that it was published. But that book is so much different because of the time, and it's such a fuller picture and such an in-depth look at Heidi's life, because I was her assistant. So really, every single thing that she touched and was involved in, I also touched and learned and helped her, delegate and do what she does. So when I finished, God said to me, as long as you don't quit, if I give you a promise, I will bring that to fulfillment. Like, that's part of the promise, is the completion of it. And even if you feel discouraged, or you feel like it's not going to happen, or it's, you just, as long as you don't give up, even if you're not doing anything for it at the moment. Because there were seasons where I was running really hard. I was working really hard, traveling with Heidi. There was no time to write or do anything. But to see the completion of it, and to see now that, long after the work, I think I finished that. It came out 3 years ago. So I haven't put any time or effort into it in 3 years. And I still hear from people saying, this was life-changing. Like, this impacted me so much, or whatever it was. Somebody on your post said, I'm reading it to my 12-year-old right now during the coronavirus. And I'm like, that's amazing. So to see the fruit of it long after the work that I put into it is such a reward to me. And I hope that's an encouragement to everyone else who's writing something, who maybe feels like they don't know if it will get published. They don't know if anyone will ever read it. But as long as they persevere and keep going and just take the next step in front of them, it will come to completion. So I can say more about a few other things, but I think that would be my main encouragement to writers who are near the end of their project, or maybe stuck somewhere in the middle and they can't see the end.
It's so good. I just love, it's almost like a birthing, but it's quite a while of birthing. And the faithfulness. Can you hold that book up?
Yes.
I know you have it there. The Love Like Fire. I think I read that in 1 or 2 sittings. I remember exactly where I was in Reading when I was reading that. I was just by some secret spot, by some water, and it is a powerful book. And the thing I love about the way you wrote it too, you plan to write it in a way that non-Christians could actually connect to it. And it is so well written and well done, for someone we both know and love so well. And what an incredible way to honor, just a living legend. And so I hope everyone watching and everyone who will watch gets a hold of that, gives it to your friends and family, especially during this time. If you want to learn about a woman that has endured trials and tribulations and still had hope and joy, Cassandra captures the heart and life of Heidi Baker so well. It is an excellent book. And I'm not just saying that because Cassandra is my friend and I love Heidi. I really did feel it was well written. So really encourage you guys, check that out. And I think we do have a few questions from the people. I know some people, we actually have a few questions. This is great. Thank you guys for sending in some questions. And we have one question. Do you know, this is from Jenny all the way in Virginia. I did a workshop out there, amazing workshop. We had such a good time. She asked, did you know the main point before starting, or does the book come from the writing? Do you know what you want to say before starting?
Yeah, great.
Changes, but yeah.
Yeah, great question. That's a fantastic question. I've done a few different projects, and it's always the same for me in that I don't know everything about the book. And that can be hard to get started when you feel like there's a lot you don't know yet. But what I have found in my process, I've learned to trust the process, and I write one chapter at a time. And if you don't know the chapter, if you don't know the whole chapter, that's okay too. Start with whatever you know. And so I'll start with a story or something that I've seen, as in Heidi's case, I was there observing and seeing and what impacted me. So I would write that scene, that one scene that I saw. For example, somewhere near the beginning of the book, there's a scene where we're going on an outreach to this like crazy island in the middle of nowhere where this tribe lives. They've hardly had any contact with the outside world. And Roland is super sick from dementia and some other things. And I wrote that, but I didn't know where it would fit in the book. I didn't know if it would be at the beginning, in the middle, or the end. And that's okay. And that's what I always want to teach writers, is that it doesn't matter if you know or don't know where it goes. Mm-hmm. And also not to feel like you have to write about something that you're not passionate about. If you're not engaged with it, if you're not engaged with that material in that moment, put it aside for later. Don't write about it until you actually feel engaged with it. So go with and write what you are feeling passionate about, what you're engaged with, because your reader is going to be interested in what you're interested in at that moment. So if you're not feeling the emotion behind it, just put it aside for later and start wherever you're feeling that emotion. And I think you're going to get the best result. And then at the end, you can come and it's like a puzzle. And you figure out what your frame is, and you figure out, do I want to tell a chronological story? Do I want to start in the beginning of the story and then the middle and then the end? Or maybe you want to start near the end somewhere and then flash back and give the context. Like in, I think chapter 4 or 5 in my book is Heidi's early life, like her childhood. We would never have known, I would have never known about that because she doesn't talk about it. She doesn't have a reason to. I wanted to know about her family, what her mom was like. She used to want to be a veterinarian and she had like 15 pets, like those details are just priceless. So I started in present day somewhere in Mozambique, something I'm observing that's really fascinating, like this island and the people and Roland, and the stakes are really high because the doctors are telling Heidi and the family, like, have the children come and say goodbye because he's not going to make it much longer. But he's still going on an outreach with us, and he just has his mat and he lays in the dirt, and does nothing. It was something that I was witnessing and wanted to write about, but I didn't know where it would fit. So in the end, it came together when you find, this is how I'm going to tell this story and this is what makes sense. So that, for me, that process happens at the end. And also, I think one other thing I would add for new writers or for anybody writing is not to be a perfectionist, because that will hold you back and really limit. When people get writer's block, I think sometimes that is what is giving them that block, because they're feeling like, I should be doing something better than I am. And so you just get bound up and you can't get free from that. So give yourself permission to write badly. Give yourself permission to do it badly. It's just a first draft. And actually, I feel like where my writing really shines is when I edit and edit and edit and edit. And then the language becomes beautiful. Like, I love making something beautiful, not just like getting the point to you, but I want it to also be a work of art. Like the way the words sound and they're arranged and the images that they evoke. So that's another thing I would say. Don't be a perfectionist. Give yourself permission to do it badly, because it's not going to be bad when you release it to the world. It's going to be beautiful, but sometimes it starts out that way, messy.
So good. Such great just wisdom and tips from a very long process. And another question that kind of is similar to what you just shared is one of our authors, she asked, how many times do you go over your manuscript when you feel like it is almost complete? At what point do you stop? What does that process look like? You know, like you have the manuscript, you have everything done, you kind of, now it's just refining. How many times do you do that? Because I think sometimes I know I'll get to a point where I refine, and then I start destroying it because I need to stop. I think most people stop too soon, though. I think most people think, oh, it's good, and they don't refine enough, and then it's not as excellent as it could be. What's your take on that question?
Gosh, yeah, I agree with you, Jen. I edit and I edit and I edit, and I think, like I said, for me, that's where my strength is. Because what I found is, this will be a helpful tip for somebody. The writing process itself is the right brain. It's the creative, intuitive side, but the editing process is actually the opposite brain. It's the left brain, the analytical side. I happen to have, I feel like, a good balance of both, but I cannot write and edit at the same time. I can't switch back and forth between my right brain and my left brain. Usually when I get into my left brain, the analytical side, I can't access that creative flow. So for me personally, I get it all out. I write, I'm in the creative brain, and then the editing side, the analytical side. And I spend a lot of time editing. I go over it. I couldn't even count, probably 50 to 100 times maybe. And, different chapters, depending on what it is, more than others. And for me, I'm not a perfectionist. I've learned to let that go, but I want it to be excellent, and I want it to be as good as possible. And I don't want one single typo in my book, because that's something you can actually control. You can go through it and make sure it's excellent and it's not poor quality. Because I think those things they speak to people, like if I want a really excellent product, it has to be at a really high standard. So, I mean, even with my publisher, honestly, I had the manuscript, like, no typos, flawless. It was like my final, after all my creative editing, I did the line editing. And she, for some reason, went over it again and sent it back to me, and it was full of typos and error. So just the process with my publisher, I had to go back and forth with her like 5 to 6 times. And it was really frustrating, because I'm like, you're the professional publisher. Like, I'm the writer. This should not be the case. But it was worth it in the end, for sure.
Wow. I love that you said you went through it 50 to 100 times. And that takes a lot of just endurance and not giving up and going over it, even with fresh eyes, probably having to take a break and with fresh eyes and then doing it. But I also love how you said, when you had done the best possible you could do and you sent it to your publisher, they came back and found mistakes. And it just shows how much we need each other. Like editors, publishers, writers, we all have different creative talents and gifts. And I love the excellence, because I feel like even our works and everyone in this community, the Writing the Glory community, like, I want all of our books to be excellent, for there not to be any grammar mistakes, because how does that reflect God, a God of excellence? We want even the way it looks and feels and the excellence of it to give him glory. And I think even paying attention to detail, grammar, that's gonna give him glory. And so I think it's really important that we put in the extra effort, the time, sometimes invest in an editor. That's gonna make a huge difference as well. So
yeah,
super cool to hear your process. Kind of building on that, another person had a question that once it's in the hands of an agent, how long was it between the agent to publication? I know this varies and all that kind of stuff. That was a question that one of the people asked here.
Yeah, I would have to go back and look at specific dates probably in my emails to know for sure. But just from memory, I mean, the process of them shopping it around probably takes, gosh, it really depends on the book and who, if somebody buys it and how soon and how many, publishers they shop it around to. But I think mine was probably 6 to 8 weeks, maybe 2 months or something for that process. And then the publisher, maybe 6 months of a timeline. Actually, it could be longer because I remember at some point they set a publication date of April. And I think from the time the manuscript was finished, we were finishing editing it, it was still 6 months away to the date that they picked. They could have picked like the December publication date, but they thought it would do better in the spring release. So they have all kinds of reasons for their timelines. So it definitely was slower than I would have liked. But again, the patience is really key because in the end, it's worth it. Once you get that final launch, like it just continues. So it never really stops.
Yeah, so good. And I think for my process, I ended up submitting a proposal, 20-page proposal. Acquisition editor invited me to do it. I thought it was a done deal. She was actually disappointed in it and wanted me to resubmit. And I was kind of heartbroken and ended up taking almost a year before I resubmitted because I had other books I released. And then she really kind of pushed me to resubmit. I did. They liked it. They took it on, and then it began. A whole summer I spent writing, and then probably 4 or 5 months I just did editing back and forth with the publishers, which was an amazing process because they edited like I don't know how many extra times and brought the book to a whole nother level, and then released I think in the summer. So it is quite
Which book was that?
That was the Walking on Water. I did that with
Okay.
Chosen, and I love that whole experience. But it's timing as well because I had to get Writing the Glory and Ignite Zeus out before then, so I wasn't necessarily ready to write that, and so it was delayed. And thankfully, you have people that fight for you, and I wouldn't be here today if that one lady did not fight for me. So I'm super super thankful for that process. Also, Cassandra, we have some people here, they just finished their book, they just published, and you're sharing these cool testimonies of how people are reading your book and being touched 3 years later. One of the authors, just Tina, she asked, how did people discover your book and hear about it? Like how did you market it or get the word out there?
That's a good question. I'm a horrible marketer. Like I wish that I were good at marketing, but I just need to know I need to learn everything and start at ground zero because I just don't even know. But so I really haven't done much marketing. Sometimes I wonder if I should because I'm like, this is going to impact people. I know that it will. So the more people who get a hold of it, the more people will be impacted. So maybe in the future I'll learn what I need to learn to do that. But I think mostly people, because they know Heidi, and it's really the only full biography on Heidi. I think people find out about it probably in all different types of ways, maybe through Google, maybe when she's speaking. I know that she takes it along with her to her conferences when she speaks. So that's my guess. It's mostly how people find out about it. But I would say for writers who are writing, what I do know about marketing, I've been told it's really great to do a blog or to do a podcast or to do something basically to connect with your readers and to just continue to give them valuable content and give them a way to connect with you. And you get email addresses and then you keep them in touch with your current project. So I'm just starting to learn about how that whole process works. And I hope to do that, actually. I hope to start a blog, and I do have a website. I just haven't done much with it, CassandraSoars.com. So my hope is to do a blog and maybe, some video blogs or something. So this is a good first step.
That's awesome. I love it. And just to encourage Tina, I think reminding everyone too, a book is a movement. And so, it's nice. A book is part of a kind of a tool and a support. It's not the end all. Like you're carrying a movement within your life, and a book will support that. So I think it's thinking of what that movement looks like and how that can tie in. So videos, blogs, absolutely. Speaking engagements, I think, is one of the best ways. I think I sell most of my books when I do conferences or workshops. but also taking clips of it and posting it on a blog, getting people talking about it, having small groups. I think we should really, get a marketer in here, because that's not my strength either. I just pray and intercede and trust it to God and hope that it goes somewhere. The other thing is, if you know somebody that really believes in you and is willing to share a post, that's huge as well. Some people who have a bigger platform than you, and if they're willing to say, hey, check out my friend's book, they just released it with a link, that's huge. If you feel comfortable doing that. Some people may or may not, but some people would probably love to do that.
Yeah.
Or getting it on other people's websites, you have to be smart about that. You don't want to be pushy, but also inviting people to invest in you and what God's doing in and through your life. So really great questions, guys. This is so fun to have you. Cassandra, a few people asked who published the book, and I think it was Charisma, right?
It was Charisma, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And your other book, do you have that one with you?
I can grab it. Do you want me to grab it?
Yeah, that would be great.
A second.
So Cassandra wrote another book, and we're going to get her back here right now.
All right, here we go. So here is my other book. And what's cool about this that I didn't know, it's called Yellow, A Memoir of Resilience. And it's on Amazon. It's under CL Soars, so not my full first name, but I didn't realize when I was writing this book, I actually wrote this book when I was in grad school. So I wrote the Yellow book first before Love Like Fire, even though Love Like Fire was published first. And Yellow is actually my personal story of overcoming trauma in childhood, like severe dysfunctional family, a lot of abuse, foster homes, whatever you can think of probably. And so it's cool because the end of Yellow actually ends with me, which I didn't know it would end this way, but me going to Africa. And I found such a redemptive connection with the kids in Mozambique, because I understood them immediately. They didn't have a mom and a dad, and I knew what that felt like. I had a mom and a dad, but they didn't take that role in my life in a redemptive way. And so it was full circle for me, and I got a lot of healing giving to them, being an older sister figure in their lives. So it really, Love Like Fire picks up where Yellow leaves off. So it's fun how they're connected in that way. I didn't expect that. I didn't know the ending would go there.
I love that. That is so unique, and just the timing, that's just really powerful.
I know it.
And is Yellow published, or did you self-publish that?
I self-published Yellow, yeah. And that was an interesting journey, because when I was in grad school, I think it was 2003 to 2005, at that point, it wasn't very respected if you were a professional writer. If you just wanted a few hundred people to read it, friends and family, like that was totally like encouraged. But if you were a professional, you were encouraged to get an agent and to go the traditional publishing route. But things have changed so much since that time. And the traditional publishing route, there are a lot of tricky things about it. So I was really happy to self-publish Yellow, and I would do it again.
And what would you say, another question that came up, because now you've self-published and you've traditionally published, pros and cons of both. What would you say to people who are kind of finishing their manuscript, not sure which direction to go?
Yeah, I think it's easier to self-publish. Amazon KDP makes it very simple. You can upload your cover design, you can upload your manuscript, and as soon as you're ready to hit, publish, it can be ordered online from Amazon, and you get the copy in your hands in a few days. So that is so simple. The traditional publisher, it's just a long process like we've already talked about, but in terms of financially, they also take the majority of the profit. I think you may end up with 15 to 20% or something of each book sale, while they're getting 75 to 80%. So that seems really imbalanced to me. When you've done the work, it's your baby, it's your creative product. And, so there are a lot of different angles on it. I think it's just for each person, what works best for them and why.
Yeah, that's so good. And I've shared about this as well with at the workshop, most of them, unless we didn't get to that place. But I've done a bunch of books self-published, and a few books with traditional publishers. And there's just so many pros and cons for both: the creative freedom of expression, the pioneering, the entrepreneurship of self-publishing, and then working with a team of excellent people that are for you, and praying for you if you find the right tribe and people. So and they invest quite a bit into it. You don't make as much money per book, but marketing wise, usually publishers will get it to a far more expanse platform than you could do on your own at times. But then you own your own rights too. So I'm able to ignite Azusa. I have that in German and in Portuguese, and it's all in my own rights that I get to sell to other nations, which is amazing. So there's so many, I think, pros and cons to both. It's really important we invite the Holy Spirit into that process. Those of you that want to publish, encourage you to go after that. Find people that kind of carry your heart and will believe in you. And if that doesn't work, don't give up. Then I would go the self-publishing route and just keep release what you've stewarded, because I think it should get out there either way. So really great questions. I'll ask you a question, Cassandra. I know you have some stuff on your heart I definitely want you to release at the end, but the process of you writing Yellow, because this is like your own journey, your own story, probably almost very cathartic or sozo like healing process. I don't even know. Can you share a bit more about that process and what that was like working on that project?
Yeah, I can. Thanks for asking that question. When I was in my early 20s in grad school, like I said, is when I started that process. And it was very vulnerable to write about that in grad school and get feedback on my writing and on those events from my peers, in grad school. And I remember the first chapter I tried to write and I got workshopped. It was not good. It was bad. And I remember feeling really like, first of all, I was still learning how to write well. I was probably mediocre at the time. So there was that dynamic. Regardless of what the content was, that's part of the writing program. But then you bring in that sort of content that's so personal and private and vulnerable. And actually, it was so healing for me to open up my life in that way and get the live feedback from people. It was really good for me to do that. So I think, my perspective changed because I was in my early 20s when I started that, and I was reflecting on things. I think this story started, I started the book when I was 15 and I was in a foster home, and that's where the story starts in Yellow. And so that really was 6 or 7 years, earlier. So I wasn't that far removed yet. And I had a certain perspective when I started writing it. And then I remember one lady she was probably in her mid 50s at the time. She commented on an event in my life. And she said, I actually see it completely differently. You were a child, and how could you have known or, taken a responsibility for that? That wasn't your role. It was somebody else's responsibility to do that. And I thought to myself, oh, that's really interesting. That's probably true. But because I'm so close to it, when I was 15 or when I was 16, I thought, well, I'm really mature for my age because I've been through all of this. I've been taking care of everyone my whole life. I'm basically an adult, so I have the responsibility too. So my perspective definitely shifted as time went on, as I wrote the book. And I'm so happy I didn't publish that book when I was in my 20s, because it would have been a totally different book and different perspective on those events. And so I actually put it aside. I had the book written and finished when I finished grad school. So I was 24, right before I went to Mozambique. And I put it aside, and I think I put it aside for like 10 or 11 years and came back to it after Love Like Fire was finished. And then I revised it, and it was like so much of it was a different perspective. It got a whole different ending. It hadn't ended yet because I had never gone to Mozambique when I finished it the first time. And now that's the ending. It just wasn't finished. So, and I had when I came back to it that second time in my 30s, I had some profound, healing, like a more emotional healing. I had gotten a ton in my early 20s, and that's part of the book, like how I got breakthrough. But it was like a deeper level, you know, and I did sozo for like, gosh, I don't know, 6 months or a year as I was redoing this book in my 30s. I'm like, I want to get even deeper healing. So I did sozo every single week, like in conjunction with editing it, and talked about those like memories and experiences and just made sure like I was getting as much healing as I could. And it was a really beautiful time. It wasn't painful anymore. It was kind of like, okay, like, you know, I'm in my mid 30s now. This is more removed from me. Childhood is like very distant now. It wasn't. So yeah, that was a really interesting journey.
Wow. And I love how you completely engaged in the process. Like you were writing about all these things and experiencing healing in the midst of it, through that process. And I just know for my life, writing it is almost a sozo. It is almost a healing process. And you were so present and going deeper in that. That is amazing. The other thing that stood out to me when you were sharing was about community, and how you were in a writing group and you were vulnerable. And this was at college, right? In a class, grad school. And what would you say, Cassandra, about inviting community into the writing process, and how has that helped you grow your own writing?
Yeah, I think it's super helpful. That was probably, I would say, the single most reason that I grew as a writer, and I went from mediocre to more on the good scale, you know, because I had people critiquing my work. I heard their feedback. I heard what they resonated with, what maybe didn't work. And I also read their writing, and they were amazing writers. And I remember crying to my mom, who was a professor, my adopted mom, not my biological mom, when I was in grad school, like, Mom, these people are so amazing. And I don't know if I can do this. I'm not good, you know, just feeling really inadequate my first semester. And I remember one of the girls in my program, she was a math professor who went back to grad school for writing, because she also had that creative brain and she wanted to write. And she said, Cassandra, I've never seen anything like it. You went from like average to really good in like such a short time. I've never seen anyone improve that much. And I can honestly say I improved that much because of the input, the critique I got from other people, and also reading their writing. And I learned from them, because I was looking at their writing in a way and dissecting it that I wouldn't have done with a professional writer, a book I was just reading who I didn't know the author. But I was actually learning from my peers, like, wow, like look at how they did that, and look how they use that metaphor there, and this language is beautiful, and how do I write like that, you know? So I would say community is really important. And I'll just touch on, so right now I'm part of a writing group in Reading. I think it's important just to create your own. A friend and I created our own, you know, and they're not looking to publish, they're doing it for fun, most of them, but it's really valuable to have people look at your work, and we critique each other's work and tell them what we liked and what doesn't work, or what questions we still have about their work. I just want to go back real quick to the last point we were talking about going through my life journey and writing, and, you know, it being cathartic. I will say that I did get a huge breakthrough in inner healing before I started writing. And I think that's helpful, to have some sort of perspective and be able to write from a place where it's not going to really hurt you or damage you more because you're reflecting on painful things. It can be very healing. The other thing that's so cool about writing, and in the field of psychology, they talk about this, when trauma happens to someone, basically your brain doesn't process the trauma the normal way that you process other memories, other good memories, or things, normal things in life. Basically that trauma gets stuck in your brain in a pattern that isn't fully processed. It's like putting away something, like you would file your receipts and bills, you know, in their normal places. Well, the trauma gets stuck somewhere. It's like not going into its file. And they say that writing your story can actually help your brain to process it correctly. And so you're not going to have the same issue that you did when the trauma was stuck. So I think that's really interesting. There's a lot you can study on that, but I know that that's true for me, because you're putting it into a frame, and your brain is understanding it, and you're recognizing timing and sequencing, and it's a way to process. So it can be very healing and cathartic in that way.
I love that, how even writing heals trauma and that whole process. And it's true. That is, Yeah, it is such a process. I remember I wanted to write a book when I was in Maui back here, and I just wasn't ready to do it. My heart, everything was too raw, and my heart wasn't ready to dive into that process yet. I think I am now, a year and a half later, a bit more ready. Things have changed, and I'm ready to go there. But yeah, you have to be kind of ready for that season. And I love how you started the book so young, and then the Lord brought it up later, and you had a completely different perspective. And even the timing with Mozambique is just so cool. One more question for me, and then I want you to just share. I'll ask you another question just to impart over the crew. But you mentioned something about your writing group, and I think that is such a key. What do you guys do practically? Do you guys meet every week? Just practically, what if people want to do their own writing group? How would you encourage them to get started in that?
Yeah, like I said, I initiated it with another friend. So I think it's good to be proactive. And it doesn't have to be a professional writer. It can be anybody who's interested in writing or reading, you know. And so we got together and we said, what would be doable for us? We decided on every other week, so that wasn't such a huge time commitment every week. But you could certainly do every week. You could even do once a month. So we do every other week. We're actually on a break right now. So we take breaks in between because it can get really, you know, it can feel tedious if it's just ongoing forever. So we're on a long extended break, but we're probably going to start up again soon here. So, but what we do is I think we choose 2 or 3 people per time that we meet. They know beforehand, and they get to submit up to like 5 to 10 pages of whatever they're working on. So you can choose, you know, what page limit you want to give to the group to read and comment on. So we ask people to read it. We send it out to them the week before and have them read it before they come. So they're prepared with comments and they've actually taken their time. They've looked at it. And then we basically spend the whole time going over each other's work. So those 2 or 3 people, they'll each get, I think we meet for an hour and a half to 2 hours. So we divide up the time equally. We try to like be really fair in that. So we give each person, let's say 30 minutes or 45 minutes or whatever, and we talk about their work and what we really liked, what we wanted to know more of, what they could improve on, all those kinds of things. And some of us will actually write comments on the printed pages too, so that they can see it in the text, like what we're talking about. And, you know, you can actually do line editing. If somebody's like really good at grammar and you want that kind of help, then I have a few people in our group who mark all the things, and that's super helpful too. So yeah, that's what we do.
So good. And then another person, I just know family accelerates growth, right? And community, and it really does, like crazy. One more question from one of our Writing in the Glory alumni. She said, for a beginner, would you recommend taking a writing class or participating in personal coaching?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think you could do any of the above. You could do coaching, you could do a class. The easiest thing to do would be to get a book about writing. William Zinsser has a book. Zinsser is his last name. I think it's called On Writing. But Anne Lamott has a book about writing. There are a bunch of different resources that you can read, and that will be really helpful for the practical aspects. If you feel like there's more you want to know practically, I'd say you can just start by reading. The other thing I really recommend for any writer, whatever project they're working on, like I had a vision for my book. Once I knew I was supposed to write about Heidi's story, I thought I need to find a model, another book that tells a similar story about a person that I can use as a model. So I can see, what did they do well? How did they organize it? How did they keep the reader interested in this person's story? And my model was a book called Mountains Beyond Mountains. And it's the story of Paul Farmer, who's a doctor. He studied at Harvard, and he went to Haiti and he built his own hospital, and he works with the poor. And so he's in the medical field doing a similar kind of humanitarian work to Heidi. And it was such a touching book, and it was so moving and so well written. So that was a model I found that I could dissect, and I could look at what he did sort of the way I dissected my peers in grad school. Like, how did they write what they wrote, and what was really successful for them, and how can I learn from that? So you can learn from anything you read, but read things that are like what you want to write about and learn from those. And that was honestly going to be your best teacher, I think. For me, it was.
So good. So, and now I would love, Cassandra, we have, a whole writing community. They want to release works from a place of encountering God's love, and just the time that we find ourselves in. There's been this urgency within me to really try to catalyze and ignite people to release works of hope and actually kind of help birth their projects and no more delay. What would you kind of just final, I know you want to read a special excerpt too, but what would you say to encourage the people on this writing journey, wherever they're at in the journey, for such a time as this? What would be on your heart to just kind of impart to them?
Yeah, what I felt earlier for everyone who was listening, I felt like more than ever in this current climate, we need stories of hope. We need people who, storytellers and writers show the way. It's like kind of like that prophetic vision where you can see the bigger picture. You can see the universal themes. That's one of the things that we talk about in writing. How does what I'm going through in my life apply to somebody else? That's a universal theme. We're all human. We all suffer. We all go through things, and our world's suffering on a global scale right now. And so we need the people who see the bigger picture and who can look beyond it and see the hope, and they can see the stories of courage or, the inspirational stories. And they're not going to run from the darkness and hide away in a room and hope that it's all over soon, but they're actually going to be prophets in the sense that like they point people towards the light and the way and the truth. And that's what we're called to do as writers, as hope bringers and givers. So I really feel like a mandate for everyone who's watching to not just sit idly by and watch what's happening, but think about and consider how you can contribute to the good of others and how you can encourage. And words are so powerful, and we really do create worlds with our words. The world, if you believe in Genesis, the world was created through words. And so we create similar worlds. We can see vision of light and beauty and a story that has never been told, and bring that into reality, and that can encourage somebody else, whether it's fiction or nonfiction or whatever it is. So I think that's what I would say, and I get really excited about that because I can feel the wind on that.
Oh, so good. So good. And thank you so much for making time to join us. And I really hope everyone watching picks up Love Like Fire and Yellow as well. Is that available now?
Yeah, it's available. It's on Amazon.
So we'll have to post a link at the bottom of this so people can catch up with you, as well as you also do some editing. So I know you've birthed a lot of projects and helped people like midwife them, and you've also released your own works. And it's just been such an honor to have you as the very first guest on our Writing in the Glory video. So thank you so much. And I just want to kind of pass the torch to you. I know you wanted to share and read an excerpt just as we close. If you could also pray over everyone too, that would be really powerful.
Cool. Yeah. Just, this was highlighted to me earlier today when I was thinking about this time. There's a short passage in Love Like Fire that is so relevant for today. And it's kind of like that prophetic vision sense that I was talking about a little bit ago, where something that I wrote about in Heidi's life that happened is so relevant for today with the coronavirus. And something that I loved about and learned from Heidi was, instead of running from suffering and sickness and hiding away, like we've all been told we should do right now, she actually did the opposite and ran towards the contagious illness, which was cholera in this case. So I thought, how cool would it be just to share this little piece with you to encourage you in this season, so you can see what's possible when you release a story in the future, and how it can continue to speak to people in events and times that are, in the future. So, the pretext for this is there was a wedding of one of Heidi's pastors at the Iris Center in Mozambique. It was a beautiful day, a beautiful wedding. And then a couple of days later, everybody gets terribly sick. So I'll start reading now. This is page 41. But many of the kids started vomiting and didn't stop. The Mozambican men who helped at the Iris base also got deathly sick. Heidi and Roland spent most of their time driving people to the hospital, sometimes taking 10 to 15 kids at a time. When the doctors examined them, they determined the kids had cholera, and the infected kids and adults had to be taken to a tent outside of the city. The doctor from the Department of Health was furious with Heidi, and Heidi had to keep seeing her as she brought more and more kids to the hospital to be examined and then to the tent filled with the dying. "You're going to kill half of Maputo with this. This is your fault." The doctor spat at Heidi, shaking her finger at her. All Heidi could do was pray. She wept and she prayed, "Please, God, please help. These are your children too. Show me what to do." As she cried, she saw a picture of herself visiting the children inside the tent, holding them cheek to cheek, heart to heart. And so cholera is like severely contagious too. So it's very similar to the coronavirus in that way. After that vision, Heidi knew she needed to go inside the tent, but nobody was allowed to enter. Heidi called Serafino, a Mozambican colleague, who agreed to go with her. Heidi and Serafino looked at each other when they saw the guards at the door. They had AK-47s over their shoulders, which is normal in Mozambique for guards, and they knew they weren't supposed to let anyone in or out. Cholera was a deadly disease and also highly contagious. No one was to get through those doors. It was more off limits than the emergency room. When the guards saw Heidi, they smiled and welcomed her. She and Serafino walked right in, hiding their surprise and acting as if they belonged there. "Hola, mama," the guards said, even opening the tent flap for her. It felt like supernatural favor as they walked on through into the dying room, but what they saw on the other side of the tent flap broke their hearts. There were over 80 kids and adults squeezed into the space. Each one lay on a wooden board with a hole in it and a bucket underneath. The bucket was to catch the diarrhea. They were so weak they couldn't get up to go to the bathroom. The kids were severely dehydrated as a result, and many of their eyes were sunken in. Hydration was important, but in a country like Mozambique, there was no way the necessary equipment would be available for rehydration. No other medical people were there. There was no treatment or medication for cholera there in Mozambique at the time. It looked like a refugee camp for the dying. Heidi's heart broke when she saw Juma, an incredible boy Heidi took home from the streets and loved into her family. She picked him up and held him against her heart as she had done when she first met him. She rocked him in her arms. He vomited on her, but still she continued to pray. She picked up the little girl in the next bed who was soiled and smelled, but Heidi held her too, not caring when the excrement soiled her clothes. She could feel love radiating from her, and she was now convinced by the extreme compassion she was experiencing that God would do something. Serafina followed her lead and held each child while he prayed for him. About halfway through their time in the tent, the doctor from the health department came in. She had on a mask, boots, and was fully covered in a protective gown. That reminds me of the coronavirus doctors. You idiot, what are you doing? You're going to die. Don't you know? They're all going to die and you're going to die. What are you thinking? What are you doing?" The woman was frantic. Heidi looked at her calmly. "I'm going to live and not die, and so is everyone in this room." The doctor was furious that Heidi and Serafino were already completely contaminated, but she didn't make them leave because it was already too late. Full exposure had already occurred. "You're nuts," she mumbled, walking away. One by one, Heidi fully embraced every child until she had touched each one. She hugged them close to her heart, holding them in her arms and resting her cheek against theirs as she had seen in the vision. She felt such peace and joy. She felt love himself radiating through her and into them, and knew something was happening. He was God, the definition of goodness and compassion and healing. Hours later, after they had visited each person in the tent, they left for a few minutes to fetch juice and cookies for the kids. Heidi knew these small treats would make a tremendous difference to their emotional states. The next day, when Heidi went back to visit, 20 of her kids were standing there waiting for her. They had recovered overnight. They were ready to go home. She was overjoyed. The day after that, another group of kids and adults got up, having recovered their strength. By the third day, the room cleared out, and not one person in what the doctor called the dying tent died. The following week, the doctor came to find Heidi at the IRIS base. "Your God is God," she said with tears in her eyes. "I didn't believe it until I saw him heal those children. I want to work with you," she said simply. So I just thought that how amazing is that story for this time and this season, and what an example for us. We do not need to be hiding away. I mean, seriously, we need to be wise and not be presumptuous and stupid. Like, it's not like we're promised anything, but when you feel that inner knowing of what you're supposed to do and what you're called to do, you do it. And she knew, she wasn't being presumptive. She wasn't saying, I'm going to live no matter what, and I can't get, nothing can touch me. She actually had a vision where she was supposed to do that. And so I just think, what an amazing example of following and listening and following, and also not giving into fear. And I think that's really, really important for us in this season of like, we have a calling, we have a purpose, we have a destiny. We all have different assignments, you know, in our individual lives. And I think that there is a way to still complete those assignments and still move forward and not just like shut down out of fear. So that's what I would encourage you with. And also look how cool that is that I wrote that how many years ago, that happened with Heidi, however many more years ago. And it's so relevant and applicable today. So I just released that to you guys, and I can't wait to see what stories you're going to tell that are going to bear that same kind of fruit. So I'll just impart that. I think that's a good impartation.
Wow, that was powerful. Wow, what a good timing for that story. Thank you so much, Cassandra, for just sharing your heart with us and imparting to this next generation of authors. And just want to encourage all the writers in the glory to continue your activation this week. Let's continue to release posts and works of hope. Let's saturate the social media and everything with poems and songs and blogs and just any sort of writings and pieces of hope in this time. Radical faith. Wow, that's just a powerful story. So I'm just going to close in prayer. Thank you guys all for joining us. Thank you, Cassandra, for just giving up your afternoon to sow and invest in this community. And I'll just close in prayer. Jesus, I thank you for every person here. And I pray that what was just imparted to us, those seeds would go deep inside of us and bear much, much fruit for the glory of King Jesus. God, give us that fire, that love that is like fire that will go into the hurting, the broken, the dying as we're led of the Holy Spirit, and that we will be consumed with the fire of God, that no weapon formed against us would prosper, and that we would bring hope and be hope givers and releasers for such a time as this. So we just worship you and praise you and thank you, Jesus, that you are King and Lord over all. We thank you again, Cassandra, for being a part of this. And
thank you. How fun. It was so great. I loved it.
It was great. So until next time, we'll see everyone on the other side, but blessing you guys with great hope and love like fire for such a time as this.
And I love your book, Writing in the Glory. And I feel like some people say, well, I'm not a writer, but it's the principles in your book are singing in the glory, writing in the glory, working in the glory, moving in the glory. It's being with him where he is.